So, lads, news just in that Doc Rivers has stepped down as being the coach or has been let go as the coach of the Los Angeles Clippers. Not really a surprise for a lot of people. And, well, if it was a surprise, I'm going to explain a little bit later why it probably shouldn't have been a surprise and why it was kind of either him or someone else that was going to have to go. It was going to be hard to run it back with that exact lineup. But in this video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what kind of went wrong for Doc Rivers, talking about some kind of over-exaggerations people have had, and the fact that he's, in some people's eyes, he's gone from the best coach in the NBA to someone that shouldn't be in the league just because of a couple of blown 3-1 leads, which obviously not a great situation to be in. But again, with everything Doc Rivers has done in his career, you can't really hold him, well, you can't hold him accountable, but you can't really forget about all he's done because of what's happened recently. But that's the problem, and that's the problem with NBA media. It's the problem with the casual NBA fans that recency bias takes over everything. But Doc Rivers is gone as coach of Clippers. The Los Angeles Clippers. Also, huge shout out to Clutch Points. Their graphics are on point. I do end up using a few of them in these videos. But the Los Angeles Clippers basically mortgaged their future going into this year. They had a decent lineup last year. Don't get me wrong, their lineup was decent, not great. It's not like you're going to be winning a championship with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari. You're not winning a championship with them. However, adding Kawhi Leonard to them, maybe you win. Especially because they have had some pretty decent sixth men. I don't understand how two guys can be nominated for sixth man of the year. Should be renamed bench player of the year. Either way, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, both really good at that role. And they gave up 5 first-round picks. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Gallinari for Paul George. Obviously the Thunder won that trade. But at the end of the day, I still think if you were the Los Angeles Clippers, back in 2019, when Paul George nearly won an MVP, when he was in that conversation, and Kawhi Leonard just won a championship, to get both of them, you make that trade 10 times out of 10. Does not matter what hindsight is. Anyone in the world makes that trade 10 times out of 10. So it can't really be held too much against the backroom staff of the Clippers. But Doc Rivers, where has he come from? So Doc Rivers started off he was with the Orlando Magic with Tracy McGrady. He did an okay job there, but where he really is best known is for this Boston Celtics lineup. The big three plus Rondo later on. He got the Boston Celtics to the NBA. He won a championship in 2008 with the Celtics. He got them to the NBA Finals in 2010. A lot of people believe that they would have won in 2009 had Kevin Garnett not got injured. Lost to Miami Heat in 2011 and 2012. Was one game off the 2012 NBA Finals, but then LeBron just turned into the LeBron that we know now and ended up playing the game of his life in Game 6 and also ended up beating him in Game 7. 2013, I'm pretty sure they lost to the Knicks. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they lost to the Knicks. And then after 2013 season, they kind of all fell apart because Doc Rivers was traded to the Clippers, and then they traded away. Ray Allen had left in 2012, and then they gave away Pierce and Kevin Garnett for the Brooklyn Nets' future. And again, just like this trade right now for the Clippers, back in 2013, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you are making that trade. Whoever the Brooklyn Nets GM is making that trade 10 times out of 10. Hindsight, obviously 2020 though. It's helped Celtics have a great future, but the Nets have had a good one as well. But then with the Los Angeles Clippers, he was the coach of one of the greatest what-if teams in NBA history, the Lob City Los Angeles Clippers. The Lob City Clippers had Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. As well as that, they had JJ Redick. For a year, they had Matt Barnes. The Lob City Clippers were expected realistically to be the team that beat the Warriors. If any team was going to beat the Warriors, it was going to be these guys. Through injuries, there were some seasons there was absolutely no fault. They just got injured, and obviously with injuries to either Blake Griffin or Chris Paul, your superstars, you're going to struggle. And then in 2015, he also blew a 3-1 lead with, I think it was like a 20-point lead in the second half of Game 6 against the Houston Rockets, where Josh Smith and Corey Brewer ended up making a comeback. So just like this year, after having a 3-1 lead in one of the games to close it out, he blew a massive lead. But again, that's not entirely on him. As much as people like to point out that they were both Doc Rivers-led teams, it's not entirely Doc Rivers' fault. He also made some kind of questionable decisions with the Clippers. I think to an extent, it is kind of a little bit lucky that Paul George and Kawhi wanted to team up and go there, because things weren't right for a couple of years after he signed his son. Which, funnily enough, for basketball reasons, it was not a bad decision. But in terms of like reputation around the league, Chris Paul hated it. In terms of reputation around the league, it kind of did harm him a little bit. But at the end of the day, Austin Rivers was good, so I can't really say anything. But what went wrong this season specifically? There was a massive lack of accountability with that Los Angeles Clippers team. From what we've heard in the backroom staff, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard were not really held accountable for anything. And I can almost guarantee you, listening to the way that even they went about their team talks, I doubt there was any accountability for anything they did wrong all season. I can guarantee you that every bad game, instead of criticizing themselves, reflecting, their thought was, we'll be fine in the playoffs. And I can guarantee you that mindset went from Doc Rivers all the way down. You can tell that team knew they were the most talented team in the NBA. You could also tell that coaching staff knew they were the most talented coaching staff in the NBA. You've got 3 guys that are good enough. You've got 2 guys who have won championships. Ty Lue is good enough to coach a contender. Sam Cassell is good enough to be a head coach. The most talented coaching staff in the league. So with that type of talent, with that type of even talent in the coach staff, there has to be some sort of ego issues. Whether that's ego issues with the players, which I think there's more of an ego issues with the role players thinking that they were better than Paul George. That was a big problem, but there has to be. No way you can put that much talent on either a staff team or an actual basketball team, the players, and for them there not to be ego issues. Because, let's be real, there's a lot of bench guys that think that they are borderline stars. Like, you can guarantee that Pat Beverly, as much as I love Pat Beverly on the floor, you can guarantee that in his head he's the most important player on the Clippers team. But were these all Doc's fault? I'm gonna have to say no. This was a dysfunctional team. As much as we don't want to say it, a lot of people are making excuses. Oh, they participated in load management. Oh, Paul George just was horrible in the playoffs, which he wasn't horrible. Paul George was inconsistent in the playoffs. As we've shown in another video, Paul George is consistently inconsistent. The only thing that's been consistent in Paul George's career is his inability to be consistent in the playoffs. Kawhi Leonard is not a leader. This team right here, I don't know what the story was, it just didn't have a leader. You had Doc Rivers, who I'd be very, very confident the players all respect him, the players all loved him, but there was already talk of him not holding players accountable. You've got guys like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard who just wanted to show up when they wanted. You've got guys like Patrick Beverly, who are some of the toughest players in the league. You've got a workhorse in Trez. You've got Lou Williams who can score with the best of them. You've got a team that on paper should have everything, but it doesn't always work like that. This team had never got any team chemistry, and I don't think it ever would have. I really don't think it would have. And I don't think you can point the finger on Doc Rivers. I don't think you can point the finger at Kawhi Leonard. I don't think you can point the finger at Paul George. Maybe someone could have stepped up and tried to bring the team a little more together. But the more we learn about each of these players as individuals, Trez, Lou Williams, Pat Bev, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, the more you can realize that these guys just aren't going to click. The more we look back on it in hindsight, the more it's just kind of ridiculous that we thought that these guys would all just figure it out. No, just figure it out. Because they didn't. And we should not have expected it. Heck, even a situation, imagine if someone on the Miami Heat team had did what Lou Williams did. Went out to a strip club for wings in the middle of the bubble. Imagine if someone on that Miami Heat team had done that. Jimmy Butler would have killed them. Jimmy Butler would have absolutely killed them. Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra, they might just get benched for good for doing something like that. And that's kind of the difference between the culture. You've got a culture setting, and then you've got a just no culture in LA. Doc Rivers did a brilliant job of building up the culture in LA up to this year. And then these two guys, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, come in. Not only do they not practice with the team, You've got two non-leaders who you can't deny either, especially Kawhi Leonard. You can't deny how well he played, but they didn't fit into the culture that Doc Rivers had really garnered in them. This hard work, hard-nosed basketball, won't back down from anybody, which is what really worked last year, which is why that they even got to the playoffs and got 2 games off the Warriors. The problem is that these two guys came in and the entire culture of the team changed, but apart from 2 guys, the personnel didn't really change. And obviously Doc has to be held a little bit accountable for that, but is it really his fault? I don't think so. I just think it was a completely dysfunctional organization. And while, yeah, Doc Rivers did not do the greatest job coaching this season, that's a given. I'm just going to say this right now. The future for Doc Rivers is that he's going to be an NBA head coach next year. I would be 99% sure of that. Doc Rivers has historically been one of the best coaches in the NBA for the last 12 years. Not only that, Doc Rivers has become, love it or hate it, Doc Rivers has become a face of the NBA. He has. There's a reason why he's out front and center, almost being like a spokesperson for issues, for non-basketball related issues that the NBA want to push. Doc Rivers is, while I'm not going to say he's as important to the NBA as a LeBron James, he is as important to the NBA as a Paul George. So he's going to be back. But did the Clippers make the right decision firing him? I'm going to say yes, because they had to change something. What they did didn't work. What they tried to do last season did not work. Letting load management happen, assuming that by the end of the regular season and the playoffs, they would just figure it out. That didn't work. Something had to change, and you know what? It's probably good for Doc as well, because losing a 3-1 lead is not a good look on any coach. And I do believe Doc Rivers is still a quality coach. But I don't think anyone could have really taken that Clippers team, because there would have been 2 extremes. Because if you get someone like a kind of more authoritarian leader that isn't just going to kind of try to relate a bit more to their players, you might end up being in a worse position than they were in right now. There's a fine line between not enough accountability and too much accountability. Obviously, Doc Rivers was one side of the line this year, but he coached the best way he thought how, and obviously it was not the right way to go about things, but we can only look in hindsight. Hindsight is 2020. But at the end of the day, Doc Rivers is still one of the best coaches in basketball. I don't care what the most recent thing he did was. I don't care about people with the "you're only as good as your last series" attitude. Doc Rivers has shown he's an incredible coach. He took the Los Angeles Clippers team last year to get into 2-2 with the greatest team to ever play basketball, the Golden State Warriors. He's a fantastic coach. And again, regardless of the playoffs, he deserves to be coaching in the NBA, and I can guarantee you he is. So anyway, that's the video. This is just a quick video talking about Doc Rivers and a little bit what went wrong with the Clippers. Also why a lot of people are blaming Doc. And heck, people are blaming Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. I don't think it's any one person, individual's fault. I think it's just that it was a dysfunctional franchise. And even for Doc, it's probably best to get out of there and to go on to somewhere else, because I think he's a fantastic NBA head coach. So anyway, that's the video. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.